Hello, viewers. Today I am here at Journey Psychology with Rochelle Singh. She is the founder and director of this clinic, and she is both hosting and being the interviewee today. So, Rochelle, thank you so much for having us and for agreeing to sit down with me today.
Thanks so much for coming. I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Yes, awesome. So Rochelle is a registered
Yeah,
psychologist, and I'm just going to ask you a couple of
sure.
just opening get to know you questions.
Sure.
So, how long has the clinic been open?
So, Journey Psychology has been open for about a year and a little bit. However, the clinic has been established. It was an established psychology practice that we acquired in 2023. So, I ran it under the old brand, and then I decided to rebrand it into Journey Psychology, just a little bit more meaningful for my view on therapy and psychology and the field of mental health. So, it's been around for about a year and a little bit now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, how did you come up with the name?
It's a funny story. I've always wanted my own clinic. Just allows me to do a little bit more with my expertise and my education, my background. And I was driving actually, and I was on the phone with my husband, looking at potential names for clinics.
Mm-hmm.
And we just landed upon Journey because I think therapy is a journey. I don't think it's a one stop, kind of destination. So yeah, it kind of stuck, and our logo is the butterfly, which represents transformation and change, which is another big part
Oh,
of
that's so
therapy.
sweet.
So we were very intentional with creating like meaning behind our name and our
Mm-hmm.
brand and our vision. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. That's such a great story.
thank you. Yeah.
Yes. And how long have you been practicing?
I've been practicing for about 5 years now. So I have both public, nonprofit experience, and then now I'm full time in private practice.
Cool,
Yeah.
amazing. So, and what made you choose this profession?
I think, I was looking at what to do with my life as everybody does.
Yes. I
There's,
still don't know.
yeah, there's always, I mean, sometimes me too, there's days where I'm like, do I really want to do this? No, but I think there's very strict pathways, especially from, South Asian families, if you go do this or this or this.
Mm-hmm.
I think my own personal experience with grief, I lost a family member when I was in my first year of university, and it really changed a lot of things for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just really made me immerse myself in psychology and just kind of like behavior and why we do what we do and why we think what we think. And then you have this layer of, I guess like cultural representations of grief and what grief means, and then this Western idea of grief. And it really got me just curious, and I just started exploring things. And then I decided to just kind of dive into it. My undergrad was in psychology, and then I did my master's in counseling.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's thank you for sharing your ambition of why
Thank
you
you.
chose this career.
Thanks.
So you kind of touched on it already, but just to set the framework of the interview, how would you define psychology?
Um, I mean, the definition of psychology is the scientific study of, the mind and human behavior and why we do what we do. It revolves around thinking, emotions. So yeah, it's really why, people behave and react to certain things either internally or externally in their world. And then you go into deeper, roots of personality, development, behavior, feelings, and kind of explore all of those different facets.
Okay. So now that we have the definition of psychology, when people come to a psychology clinic, you hear a couple different terms, counseling and therapy. So what is the difference between these two? Is there a difference?
Um, I wouldn't say there is. I think counseling and therapy are used interchangeably. I think the difference is the designation of the professional you're seeing.
Hmm.
So you have certified clinical counselors or certified Canadian counselors, and then psychologists, and psychologists can be registered or provisional. So there's a bunch of terms. I'm not going to get into it, but I think the difference is who you're seeing. And around what nature, I guess. So for myself, I'm a psychologist. I'm a regulated member of the Alberta College of Psychologists, so I can diagnose, and I do a lot more clinical type work. Um, and yeah, I see a lot of different clients from lots of different presenting concerns. So, you got the anxiety, depression, trauma. I do a lot of relationship stuff, family of origin, intergenerational trauma, childhood trauma, and I also do a lot of work with first responders.
Amazing work. So how aware are people of what this type of therapy or counseling is, and what type of access do people have?
I think there's a lot more awareness now, for sure. I think people are, the way I frame it to a lot of people is if you are sick or you have, you know, the cold or the flu, who do you go to? Doctor. If you have like, you know, muscle aches or pains, and you know, who do you go to? Like a massage therapist or like a chiropractor.
I was going to say,
physio,
physiotherapist.
right? You go see a professional who is trained in those specific things.
Right.
But there's this, you know, stigma, I guess, of if there's something wrong emotionally or mentally or you're overwhelmed, people don't come see somebody like myself. And so I always explain it as like, if you're sick, you go to a doctor. You got tooth pain, you go to a dentist. If you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, come see a psychologist. Because we are trained in, you know, the brain and behavior and the mind and the whys. And so I think that's a big part of creating access is education and awareness of what we do. A lot of people don't think, you know, don't know what we do.
Right.
I think there's also an intimidation factor around like psychology and psychologist and counseling and therapy and whatever word we use to describe it. I think people are afraid.
Yeah.
Because I think it's unknown, so it's a lot of uncertainty. I think a lot of minority cultures don't actually seek out this type of support, so they don't know what to expect. In terms of access, a lot of companies, you know, if you're working for someone, you have some sort of healthcare benefits,
Exactly.
or you have private healthcare benefits. Most of them have some sort of psychology, mental health coverage.
Yeah.
If you don't have coverage, Alberta Health Services has a lot of free programs. They've got therapy. Your doctor, your family doctor can refer you. You can come to one of our clinics, which is like a private clinic. So lots of different resources. It's just about how to access them.
And being open to actually looking to see what resources you have, right?
Yeah, and not being afraid to reach out and say, is this a fit for me? Because I also tell people therapy is very personal. So if you don't connect with your therapist, doesn't mean you don't try it again. You just have to find somebody else who might be a better fit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of touched on some things about, you know, how people define it and what people think that counseling and therapy and psychology is. And I don't know if like people hear the word or think of the word psycho when they hear psychology, and so they think, oh, it's for crazy people, but it's absolutely not, right?
It's not, but I think that's what a barrier is to, like I said, seeking out support. Yeah.
So psychology is not for psycho; it's for the psyche,
it's
which
for the
is
psyche, the mind,
spirit, and
soul. Yeah. There you go.
Awesome. So you did touch on this a little bit already, but what are the different types of therapy? I know you said intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, so in terms of types of therapy, so I guess there's two different ways to look at it. So you've got individual therapy, you've got couples therapy, family therapy, therapy for children or like adolescents, you've got group therapy. So those are different types of therapies, and then the modality or the approach that the therapist actually uses. So there's lots of different approaches. So depending on kind of what you're coming in with, you know, we might pair you with a therapist who does. So if somebody comes in for, let's say, depression, we pair them with somebody who might do more cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT. Somebody comes in for trauma, we do a lot of EMDR. So it's kind of a pairing of what is the person coming in with, and then what therapist just trained in the modality. Not all modalities work for all people, so that's also kind of you have to find what works for you, and we try to, at our clinic, we try to pair everyone up. We don't utilize like a one-size-fits-all. We make it super unique and customized to everybody's unique needs. But yeah, that's kind of, there's different types of therapies, there's different types of modalities within each, I guess, group. So couples therapy, there's different types of couples therapists. So you've got Gottman, EFT, we have some sex-based therapy, which might be another conversation for you and I later. Big taboo around that, but trying to open up some awareness. But yeah, so lots of different approaches, lots of different styles, I guess.
Okay, so you mentioned 2 or 3 different acronyms. Maybe if you could just give a brief definition
so
on those.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is CBT. It's a evidence-based practice that focuses on assessing your thoughts to create change. We've got EMDR. I'm not trained in EMDR, so I don't know a lot about it, but it's bilateral stimulation of your brain while you're, I think it's processing memory. So there's lots of different modalities. They all have acronyms just because they're really, really long. So easier to kind of explain what clients can get from them.
Okay, awesome. So with respect to our community, and again, you did touch on stigma a little bit already, but specifically within the Indo-Fijian community, why do you think there's so much stigma around seeking counseling?
Yeah. I think it goes back to like this idea of like uncertainty and unknown, not really knowing, you know, what therapy is and what it can do for you. Going back to this, you know, psycho kind of narrative of there's something seriously wrong with somebody if they go to therapy. So I think people don't want to be perceived as something's wrong with me. I think the other thing is, in therapy, we talk a lot about emotions. We talk about why we're feeling what we're feeling, and we have to describe those feelings. We have to understand where they come from in our body. And I think that's also something that's not taught to us while we were growing up. We don't talk about emotions. We don't talk about how we're feeling. You know, if you're sad or upset as a child, they say like "Chipabeto," like go in the corner.
Yeah, like where's the sick?
Yeah, right.
Let's
Like
sweep it
underneath. We don't want to talk about it. It makes us very uncomfortable. So I think we don't know how to explain how we're feeling. So if I can't explain it to myself, how am I going to explain it to a stranger? Yeah. Right. And so I think I'm just not going to go, and I'm just going to push it down and push it down and push it down. And I say we're kind of like volcanoes, just waiting to erupt at some point. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it. So it's unknown and uncertainty of like, what is this going to do? And I also don't know what I'm feeling or how I'm feeling. And if I don't know what I'm feeling, how am I going to tell somebody else who's supposed to help me? Yeah. So
that's actually a great point. So let's say somebody is in that conundrum. How do you get them out of there? How do you get them to feel their feels?
Feel their feels, yeah. My clients hate it. They always tell me, Rochelle, stop making me feel uncomfortable. Yeah. But I always say, like, you know, if you cross your arms like this, it's comfortable. But if you do it the other way around, it's uncomfortable for a little bit and your body adjusts. You start to learn, okay, this is not, you know, my normal, but it's not the worst. Yeah. And so I kind of explore the same thing with like clients of like, you do a lot of uncomfortable things in your life. Yeah. Not everything is comfortable. Life would be so boring if everything was just, you know, there. Yeah. And so thinking about, you know, creating some distance of like emotions make us feel uncomfortable. What was something you did that was uncomfortable today that had nothing to do with emotion? So we try to create some distance and say, oh, I am doing some of these things around like uncomfortability. And then you start to like unpack a layer of like vulnerability, and how they be vulnerable with themselves and with others, and where those emotions come in. I do a lot of like body work of just like, what are you feeling right now? And like, where is that sitting with you in your body? Like, where are you noticing it? And then, you know, their homework is to go home and just do like body scans and say like, how am I feeling today? Oh, I felt sad, or I felt like a tightness in my chest. Like, what is that? So a big part of it is just emotional literacy, really. Is first identifying potentially what all the emotions could be, and then figuring out where you feel in your body, what are some triggers that create this emotion, and then this idea of normalizing it's okay for you to feel this way and it's okay for you to talk about it. And I think once we are able to tell ourselves it's okay, like give ourselves permission, it makes things a lot easier, because then I'm okay to feel this way, which means I'm allowed to talk about it. Yeah, that question about like where you're feeling it physically is, it's a bit of a doozy. Like every time I sit in therapy, blah blah blah, I say something, and then she'll be like, so where are you feeling this in your body? And I'm like, I don't know. We're very cognitive, and I'm a cognitive therapist, and I'm doing a lot of trainings and a lot of work of being more somatic, being more body focused, and so it's challenging yourself to say like, get out of the problem solving, I want to fix the sadness, just where I always am, and the let's just feel the sadness and just see like, what is it saying? Because like sometimes it's okay for you to be sad or, you know, disappointed or whatever some of those emotions are that, again, maybe we've been taught to either not address them or acknowledge them, or like push them under the sofa and hope to God they don't show up again. Right? Yeah. So just for fun, if we were sitting with like a bunch of aunties and uncles, right, and you had to just like give a real quick couple sentence synopsis on what therapy is and like how it could help them, what would you say? And feel free to say it in Hindi if you want. Oh, my Hindi Fiji
Hindi or English, it doesn't matter. But
I think I would just say it's just a space for you to talk about whatever it is you need to talk about. Therapy doesn't, you know, I have a lot of clients, yes, who have some significant things going on in their life. They're in crisis. They have, you know, childhood trauma or stuff going on in their current day, and we got to work through those fires. But I have a lot of clients that are like happy, they're functioning, they are well-rounded human beings, and they use therapy as a space for like, this is my 1 hour to focus on like me. So they do a lot of like identity and self-growth and like reflective work and like, how can I be better? And we set goals for them. So like, it doesn't have to be that therapy is just something's wrong and you have to fix it. It's, I'm actually okay, and I'm gonna use this time to like explore a little bit about myself on a deeper level. Yeah. And so maybe I try to explain it to them in some way. Yeah. But I don't know if they would just say like, shh, go away. Yeah.
No, I actually like that take. I think for myself, like where my thought process
Yeah.
is because I mean, you have one life to live. Why wouldn't you want to improve
better,
yourself
yeah.
every day, right? So yeah, I actually thoroughly enjoy that process of like, okay, why did I think this in this situation? Why did
Yeah.
I behave
Or like
that
you
way?
reflect on something, or you
Yeah,
debrief it, and
yeah.
because a lot of times something happens and we deal with it and we move on, we don't actually come back,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think the coming back is that growth piece,
Yeah.
of like reflecting and learning and saying like, okay, if
Yeah.
this happened again, what would I do different?
Yeah. It's really too bad more people aren't doing this.
Hopefully, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think the awareness and the push for mental health around, like our society, I think it's grown so much. There's so many platforms and so many advocates and so many ways for people to access it. So I think there's a lot more. We see a lot more clients coming in who have never had therapy, and it's like, well, I have the benefits, so I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, great. Like, let's try. Let's see if this works for you, and if
Yeah.
it does, great. And if it doesn't, then it's not about stopping. It's about, okay, what didn't work? Let's find someone who
Yeah.
will be a better fit.
Yeah. Maybe for our community, it's also a little bit about, because you mentioned there's certain taboo subjects, right? And I feel like for our community, there's so many more subjects that
For
are
sure.
taboo.
Yeah.
Even just like, I'm going to say it in a negative connotation, but it's not, but like talking smack about your partner,
Yeah.
about your husband,
For
or,
sure.
or the husband coming and talking smack about their
or
wife.
just
like,
talking about your family life in general to
Right.
somebody
yeah,
that's not a part of the family. It's like, like beta enable, right? Like,
Exactly.
we don't talk about things inside the house outside, and I think that's a big reason why people don't access therapy, because like, well, you're talking to a complete stranger who
who's bound by confidentiality,
Yes, I can't
by
tell.
the way.
Yes, yeah. That's another layer, right? It's like, oh, can you
Yeah.
tell? It's like, well, I mean, if there's a safety risk, yes, I have to breach that confidentiality.
Right.
But everything I talk with my clients is confidential,
Yeah.
right? I think once clients also understand confidentiality, I think
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah.
okay, like I can actually like spill my guts out to you and actually start this process, because the fear is, well, you're gonna go tell so and so about my life, right? And
Yeah.
I don't want so and so to know about my life, because so and so will tell 4, 5, 6 other people,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I as uncomfortable as people are in our community talking to somebody else about certain subjects, I feel like they're also that uncomfortable bringing it out of themselves.
yeah, and I think it goes back to this idea of like, we don't know how, right?
Yeah.
I think I do a lot of attachment work, which is grounded in just like, relationships between like infants and their primary caregiver. That's what the research was around. But there's just this idea of, when we're attached to our primary caregivers, we have the secure or insecure attachment, and we learn how to explore our world based on that framework. And a lot of it is, if we weren't modeled how to do certain things, we don't know how to do them, right? So again, if our parents or caregivers or grandparents or whoever never told us, this is okay for you to be sad, and this is how you show sadness and do all these things, we learn the opposite of like, don't be sad, stop crying, stop doing this, or
Yeah.
we don't have space for emotions for whatever reason. And I think it's also because, our parents didn't know how to equip them with emotional
Yeah.
literacy. And so it's almost like this passed down piece of like, nobody knows how to deal with their emotions, so
Yeah.
that's why we don't deal with our emotions. And that's why there's, when we do deal with it, it's like almost like an emotional, just like, I don't know, volcano bursting.
Yeah.
And there's too many emotions over how many years that are just
Yeah.
kind of like showing up, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's so true, because like, I had the hardest time grasping I statements.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple concept, but I just
I
never
feel
knew how to do
X,
it,
yeah.
and I'm still learning how to phrase
The
things
feelings
that
wheel
way.
will be your best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just a big wheel with feelings, and
Okay.
you just go through like, okay, do I feel this? Do I feel this?
Yeah.
Also, sometimes like, when you look at the feelings wheel, like, which ones are familiar to you, and which ones are like, what is this feeling? I don't even know what it is. So I get them to like Google it or look at it, and then see if it ever shows up for them. Because I think exploring your feelings, you also
Yeah.
have the words for them, right?
How many feelings are there in the feelings wheel?
Well, there's 6 core emotions.
Okay.
But the feelings wheel, like, there's a whole bunch of iterations. There's like a bunch of them. I'll show you later.
Okay.
But it's also just nice to, sometimes it's like, well, I don't feel sad, but do I feel disappointed? Do I feel ashamed? Do I feel grief? Do I feel guilt?
Yeah.
Like, we don't think of those other emotions, right? We
Right.
think of like happy, mad, sad. Those are like our
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
clusters, but there's
Yeah.
so many other ones of like, what's it like for you to feel content or like relaxed,
Yeah.
right? They're very different emotions. They might have a very similar meaning, but they show up for us differently. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
So this might be very basic, but what are the 6 emotions?
Oh God, I always get them mixed up. It's happy, mad, sad. I think disappointment is one of them, and then I don't know the other two.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, and like this is stuff that we should
Yeah.
probably
We should
know for like the
probably-
back of our hand,
yeah.
but we don't. Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah, we will. We're like 4 out of 7, so we're
Yeah.
good. Or 4 out of 6.
So moving on to the next question. Now, given how the Indo-Fijian diaspora came to be and how our journey
Yeah.
was, pun intended, from emigrating from India to Fiji,
Yeah.
how might not knowing our history be affecting our mental health as
Yeah.
individuals and as a society?
Yeah, I think it's the idea of like identity and like belonging, right? Like, do we know where we belong versus like where we're from? Like, I don't know if people ask you like, oh, where are you from? You're like, I'm from Canada, and they're like, no, where are you from? It's like Canada, or where my parents are from.
Yeah.
Right, they're from Fiji, and then they're like, okay, like, were you born there? And so there's this idea of like, I identify as like Canadian, I guess,
Yeah.
but I also have this Fijian background as well,
Yeah.
which I also identify to, but
Yeah.
I don't know which one is like, I guess, my core, which one that I resonate with.
So how, and absolutely, and I know there's, just like you and I, there's so many people who were you first generation
Yeah,
Canadian?
yeah.
So same with me as many others here. And we were talking about this earlier where, you know, we don't really have an identity because, well, we should be Canadian, but all Canadians are from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then you go to Fiji and they're like, tum hiya ke nahi hai." And I mean, I've never been to India, but I'm sure they're
No.
going to tell me I'm
Yeah.
not from there
No,
either.
for sure. They're like, which part? You're not from here.
Yeah. So we are left thinking like, well, where
Who
am I from?
Yeah, and
who am I?
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I kind of connect with this population or country or ethnic background, but then I also kind of connect to this one. So I think we have like pieces, and I think that impacts, I think, our mental health. And I think when it goes back to like even just therapy, what people do in therapy sessions, like if you're doing identity work, it's like, well, who are you? It's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think not knowing maybe where we're from or where our history is, or, you know, some of these things, it leaves all these questions and like just like gaps that it's like, okay, well, I might not ever be able to fill those gaps. And I have to kind of figure out how to live my life knowing that I kind of belong, but maybe kind of don't.
Yeah. So I think, you know, would you agree that this isn't a small matter?
No.
And people not seeking counseling and therapy, they're really stunting themselves from being a better person, because if you have all these questions and you have it's not really loss of identity, but lack of identity, how do you even know where you're supposed to be going?
Well, I think it's almost like generational trauma, right? It's
which is the next topic.
okay. I jumped.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of something being passed down from generation to generation to generation. So like, you know, grandparents didn't know how to speak about emotions or didn't know what emotions were. That was passed down to parents. Parents didn't know what emotions were and how to feel them. That was passed down to us. We don't know what emotions are, so are we going to pass that down to our kids or our future generations? But if we can figure out, okay, this is what our emotions are, these are how we normalize and validate these feelings and create space for them, I mean, we're going to do it for our future generations, right? It's okay for you to have these feelings. It's okay for you to have, you know, these big feelings, or, you know, go under the couch and say, let's bring everything out, right?
I like that analogy.
And say, like, let's sort
Now's
through
the
it.
time.
Now's the time.
Now's the time to lift the rug
I mean,
and
you might have
sweep
to-
everything
sweep
out.
everything out,
Sweep it out.
It's the only time I will clean. It's just going through all of our unhidden stuff that we don't want to go through. But I think that's why there's a big, you know, awareness, or a big call to mental health, is because I think we have the awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's also just the time, right? I think it's a different time of life compared to our parents, compared to our grandparents. You know, a lot of us are more educated. We have a lot more awareness. We have a lot more resources available. Whereas like our parents didn't, right? And so I think it's not to say it's their fault or anything like that. It's just circumstance, right?
Yeah.
And the reality of immigrating to a new place. I mean, couldn't pick somewhere nice. It was like -40. Like, why? But, you know, coming here, new place, that loss of identity of being a Fijian and then coming to this place called Canada and not knowing how to, act and interact. And
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know if there was racism in Fiji, but having to deal with potentially racism here. And so you have all this other stuff you're unpacking. I mean, yeah.
There definitely was. There was clash between the indigenous Fijians and the Indo-Fijians.
And so, like, having to deal with that there and here, and then saying, well, I mean, you know, they did the best they could. And so I think it's,
absolutely,
we do now our part of, like, okay, well, maybe it's us filling in these gaps for our generation. So we can't go back. We can try to create awareness and promote it, but maybe it's moving forward. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. While you were explaining about how, like, just through what you were saying, in my head, I was thinking about the word bhatakta.
Yeah.
We're just like
just one to the other.
bhatakta hua log.
Like just one generation.
Just trying to find our station.
Yeah.
And you also touched on the history of, our parents and grandparents. So before I pose the next question, I do want to preface it with how grateful we are for and proud we are of our ancestors for their resilience.
Yes.
We are now at this conjuncture because we have the ability to ask questions. They didn't even have the ability to ask questions.
Yeah, and secret resources that that either didn't exist or they just couldn't.
And they were outright told not to ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? So they were stunted before they could even begin. But all that aside, they still survived and thrived and made it from India to Fiji to all the different places abroad. That, again, I'm going to use the word journey, had, they endured physical abuse and violence, grueling labor and exploitation, poor living conditions, malnutrition and famine, sexual abuse and gender imbalance, and psychological distress.
Wow.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
So when we talk about generational trauma, knowing that our ancestors endured all of this, what is generational trauma, intergenerational trauma, and how does it show up for all of us today?
Yeah. So trauma, I guess we look at the word trauma. I'm going to bring out my phone because I have this definition that I love of trauma. And so there's a physician, his name is Dr. Gabor Mate. He did a lot of research.
Love him.
Yes. Okay. So he did a lot of research around like addictions and trauma. And his definition of trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So it's this idea of being disconnected with yourself. So something external happens. It's not the external event. It's how we internally process it. And so, when we think of trauma, we think of something bad happened, right? The clinical definition is you witness, or are directly impacted by a significant event, and it creates all these symptoms. Intergenerational trauma is trauma that somebody else has experienced that's been passed down to me, right? So my parents' trauma of not knowing their identity has now been transformed to me or passed down to me, and now I don't know where my identity is, and I pass that on to my kids, right? And so that intergenerational piece of it just being passed down. I don't know if you've ever seen on social media, there's this reel, I guess, of a bunch of different glasses, and it's just one pour to the other.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a brown liquid or colored liquid or something.
Yeah.
It's like grandma and then mom, and then instead of the future generation pouring into the next one, they pour in just water, and they try to take out the color from that glass. And so that's how I see as intergenerational trauma, of it being passed down, and then we aren't going to continue to pass it down. We're going to try to fill that and overflow it and try to remove, all the negative things that come up for, our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors, our people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what types of things can we do in the now to, discolor that that water, if we're going with the same analogy. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's asking questions, right? It's having open conversations, because again, a lot of people don't want to talk about the bad things that happened to them or things that happened years ago that don't matter anymore. Like, I don't know if you've heard, like, when people go, oh, that happened so long ago, like, don't worry about it now, right? I mean, it does impact us in some way.
Yeah.
It's also exploring how that trauma impacts that person, right? Because again, their behaviors are being impacted, which is somehow impacting us, right? So someone is shutting down, or they're being, emotionally abusive or aggressive or whatever's coming up, I mean, we're directly dealing with that, right? So that is that trauma showing up. And so I think it's about having open conversations. It's about creating space and validating and normalizing, like, this happened to you, you know, it's a really sad thing that happened, a really bad thing that happened. How do we help? How do we not shy away from it?
So, in other words, this conversation was breaking that generational trauma.
Yeah.
Golden.
There you go.
So that kind of brings us to the close of the interview. I'll ask one last question. What percentage of the Indian diaspora do you see seeking counseling nowadays?
My clinical practice specifically, I do see quite a few, I'm going to say South Asians. I see a lot of South Asian clients, whether that's individual or couples. And a lot of them, interestingly, are from like older generations and younger generations. So I'm seeing a mix, right? So I have a lot of younger generations saying, you know, my parents or my aunts or my grandparents even, you know, should come see you. And so again, confidentiality and conflicts of interest, all those things aside, we have a couple therapists at my office here who we see a lot of South Asian clients. And so I think it is a lot more people are accessing it because I think they're curious, they want to know.
Yeah.
And I think they're recognizing, well, we have to, in order to do something different, we have to engage in something different, right?
Right, yeah.
And so if I don't do anything different, I can't expect, you know, different results. I'm always gonna have the same result without that change. So I think people are just more open to even trying it and seeing if it's a fit for them.
Yeah.
And I think also, I mean, being a person of color myself, I think a lot of people can relate to me too. So I think that also creates another layer of just rapport and trust and our therapeutic relationship. So I think a lot of my clients can relate to me, and I can relate to them. And I think it's less scary for them to be like, oh, you know, you're also
you're just like
me. You're just like me, right? You've got the brown hair and the brown skin, and you understand some of the slang or the terminology and all of these things. And it's like, yes, I do. So let's work through, you know, how this impacts you or all of those things. So
that's
we're seeing a lot more people come through just
good
from all minority populations, right? Which is nice.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Yeah. Are there any other thoughts or remarks that you want to make before we close off?
We need a lot more time.
Hey, we can always book another session.
We for sure will.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so grateful for you and just happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Likewise. I'm honored to be here with you today. Your work is admirable, especially because it is taboo for minorities like us. And you're open to discussing it with, you know, anybody who wants to. So I was happy that you were like, yes, of course, I'll do this. Yes. So I'm very thankful, and this is a beautiful space. It's a great environment. Yeah, I'm glad I got to take a tour of your facility. And I guess the moral of the conversation is that
look under your couch.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Look under your couch,
I'm going to hashtag that as the title of this interview. Look under your couch. Aise tik niche dekho. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.